So there was this thing that happened recently that I can't get out of my head involving Justin Trudeau. I suppose while I'm talking about Justin Trudeau, I should let you all know what the correct opinion on Justin Trudeau is. So here it goes. Trudeau is simultaneously objectively awful and objectively okay. See, he's objectively awful because the most objective way to judge a politician, really, is by how honest they are and how many of their policies they've delivered on. You might disagree with a politician's views, but at least if they are consistent and trustworthy, you can say that they are doing something right for those who agree with them. However, anybody who knows anything about Justin Trudeau probably already knows where I'm going with this. Trudeau is notoriously awful when it comes to keeping his promises. What's worse is that it doesn't seem to be due to incompetence, so much as he seemingly just doesn't care whether or not he delivers. The most egregious example of this is when he promised electoral reform, but then just didn't do it.
What Mr. Trudeau approved himself today was to be a liar, was to be of the most cynical variety of politician.
With all of his lies taken into account, I can say that regardless of his policies, I personally would never vote for him, just because he's so untrustworthy. So having said all of this, why is he objectively okay? Well, because he's basically just another standard, generically good-looking, charismatic, competent politician who's going to pursue an inoffensive neoliberal agenda. Now, you might say that sounds awful, but permit me to explain. Hillary Clinton was awful, but if you didn't vote for her, then you're an arsehole, because the alternative was Trump. There are a lot of morons out there who like to argue that centrists and the radical right are literally the same thing. They even have a stupid little chart to represent it. Funnily enough, people on the far right think that centrists and radical leftists are the same thing. It's almost like radicals on both sides tend to group those who disagree with them together. It's almost like the outside homogeneity effect exists. Also, I'm aware that centrists kind of started this whole thing with horseshoe theory, but I don't care who started it, I care who's going to finish it. The fact of the matter is, a generic inoffensive centrist isn't the worst thing in the world. If you're a leftist who hates Trudeau because of his support for free trade and capitalism, then you at least have to appreciate the fact that many people on the right hate Trudeau for his support for various social justice movements. By painting him as being just as bad as the populist right, you're basically saying that support for social justice movements doesn't matter, which is kind of shitty considering how much those social justice movements have done for marginalized groups. Say what you will about Trudeau, but he's not Trump. Now, speaking of Trump, what this video is actually about is that time where Trump signed his name in the wrong place on a treaty. Let's just check that this is recording. Good. That would be embarrassing if I was doing all of this. There are some edited videos showing each individual's reaction to as they realize that he signed in the wrong place. Trudeau is the one that ends up with the copy that Trump missigned. And when they hold up their treaty in the way politicians are fond of doing after they sign treaties, Trudeau does not show his to the camera. Now, in my little progressive bubble, there was an overriding interpretation of these events that was a pretty established narrative. Trump is incompetent and couldn't even sign his name in the right place in an important international document. Everybody is second-hand embarrassed on his behalf, so Trudeau, being a generally likable class act, does not hold up his copy at the end to save Trump the embarrassment of having his mistake broadcast to the world. So it surprised me when I read in the Financial Post, a Canadian newspaper, the following headline. George Bush might have forgiven Trudeau's NAFTA sulk, but Trump won't. The article continues at a later point saying, like a child miffed at having to miss playtime for the family photograph, Trudeau sulked, pointedly declining to hold up the document he'd just signed, even as the presidents of Mexico and the US proudly displayed theirs. Look, no wall, the grin of Mexico's outgoing president, Enrique Peña Nieto, seemed to say. There's really not much to be gleaned from the article apart from the fact that this article clearly puts a different spin on things entirely. It neglects to mention Trump's mistake and casts Trudeau as sulking by not holding up the deal, insinuating he is neglecting to hold it up because he's angry that he couldn't get a better deal for Canada. So why does any of this matter? Well, it matters to me because it really has been my first experience crossing from my bubble to a completely different bubble. The idea of framing Trudeau's actions as petty and churlish would have never occurred to me, just as I imagine it would have never occurred to people on the other side to frame his actions as socially intelligent and respectful. And when the exact same event can be framed in totally different ways, it's suddenly not hard to see how two people can come to have views on the world that are totally alien to each other. Having said all of this, I'm not implying that the two sides are equal. I'm not saying that I live in a liberal bubble that misrepresents reality, because it's pretty obvious that the liberal progressive way of framing Trudeau's actions is the more accurate one, all things considered. However, that's exactly what I'd say if I was raised my entire life in a liberal progressive bubble. I mean, I am objectively right, and my opinions are informed 100% by unbiased accounts that accurately depict things the way they are, and they clearly present a picture of the world much more in line with a progressive way of thinking. But that's also exactly what I'd say if I'd been raised my entire life in a liberal progressive bubble. The important thing is, I've presented to you an example of where two people can have a completely different interpretation on the same events, which is reflective of the larger problem with social media and biased news sources. Although part of the problem is clearly that these people are just morons. I mean, look at this comment from the article. I'll never forgive the morons that voted for this soy boy who is destroying the middle class along with our economy while virtue signalling with our money. Canada first. Anyway, so I guess this is goodbye. Did that video have a point? I felt like it did as I was typing it. If you think it did, then maybe hit the like button and subscribe. My next video will be a response to a guy called ER, and I hope that will be worth subscribing for, because I think it's just going to be great. Quick little video. That's what we do. Don't waste anyone's time.